Welcome to Limitless with Lisa Z, a podcast about how to move from inspiration to action and bring our dreams to life. I'm Lisa Zahiya, and each week I'll release 2 podcasts, one where I walk you through action steps about how to make your dreams a reality, with another podcast in which I interview amazing changemakers from all over the world. This podcast isn't just for listening. Take notes and take action. Let's ignite and change the world together. I am so excited about today's episode. Today, I am interviewing and speaking with the amazing Eduardo Placer. Eduardo is a story doula, keynote speaker, and global community builder. He is the CEO and founder of Fearless Communicators, a public speaking coaching business. He's a global facilitator and has led workshops with HBO, Google, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Yale, the Juilliard School, and more, and his private clients have included presidential candidates, UN ambassadors, CEOs and founders, social activists, and me, which is very exciting, and that is an amazing business, and he is an amazing trainer. Eduardo was a professional actor for 15 years, working all over the country. The training and experience led him to develop both a physical and mental approach to hack the fear of public speaking. Eduardo is also an identical twin, and since an early age has been battling an acute condition called show-tune-itis, where he spontaneously breaks into song, just like he does in this episode. Eduardo, I'm so excited to talk to you. What inspired you today?
Well, Lisa, there's a lot that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So from a space of sharing, my father was hospitalized over the weekend.
Okay.
And he went in for a belly issue, and then he had a stroke in the hospital. He is fine. Luckily, he was in the hospital. And I'm present to, he had my twin brother lives in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a phone call from my mother like at midnight on Friday into Saturday. So there was little stuff that I could do. My mother then went to the hospital, and then my father spoke to my brother. And I think he got very reflective. And what's inspiring me is gratitude.
Yeah.
For my parents. I'm inspired by their sacrifice. I'm inspired by their always showing up, even though they didn't know what the hell they were doing for a lot of it, specifically as a queer child. I feel like I'm in the landscape of aging parents and the privilege of aging parents. You know, that I'm 46 and I have both my parents. My father is 75, my mother is 72. My grandmother is turning 100.
Wow.
In May. She's also in a little bit of a decline right now, which is, she's 100, she's turning 100. Anyway, I'm just present to and grateful for family. I feel like I have won the lottery of family with all its complications and all of its craziness and all of its whatever, it is the platinum Amex card.
It sure is.
It is, I'm very, very blessed and have unbelievable family privilege. And that is something that has been a source of inspiration for me. Definitely in 2023, my father started off the year with some health challenges. So I've just been in that dance, and it's continuing to charge forth as I'm in this awakening and transition.
I'm glad to hear he's okay. And gratitude. If I ever have a stroke, let it be in a hospital.
Totally.
Wow.
Totally. Like literally he was in the hospital for gallbladder stones. And then, or he had some stomach issue. And then he was sitting in the hospital, and then like the nurse came by and was like, smile. And he couldn't. And she was like, stroke. And then they were like, literally went into action. So, in many ways, my father is blessed in that he has some medical issues. One, he has no stronger advocate than my mother.
Mm.
And you don't want to cross Aurora Placer in any type of situation. Like my parents live in Miami, and there are policies on who's allowed in and who's not allowed in, specifically at a time. So it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and my father's telling the attending nurse, my wife is going to come up here. And he was like, that's not possible. There's no way. They're not letting anybody in here. It's after the time or whatever. Sure enough, like 15 minutes later, security is escorting my mother up in the hospital into his room. And he's like, I told you,
Yeah.
you know.
I
So
love I love hearing this story because when you hear about people's stories, like you start to make more sense to me.
mm,
Yeah, because you're like, "Oh, somehow she just ended up in there." And I was like, "Yeah, you are her child,
totally,
clearly."
100%. It's like, so there's what you're telling me, and then there's another way. And
Yeah,
I think that's also, I mean, not to do a hard pivot, but I think that's also
please.
business. That's also
Mhm.
relationships. That's everything. There's like the way I'm being told, and then there's another way. And ultimately, I think it's leveraging relationships and how you treat people. Like my mother didn't
Mm.
go in there like a Karen.
Right.
My mother went there loving. She was specific. She was direct, and she was like, this is how it's going to happen. you know?
Yeah. And that is an amazing pivot because what this podcast is about is people who are inspired like you are by your family and how they turn it into action.
Mm,
So Eduardo, every time I've been in a room with you and there's people around, I
mm,
have noticed how much you are a center point for all the people in the room.
mm,
Like how they're moving forward, what they're creating in your life. Like I was like, look at how many threads go back to Eduardo.
mm,
So you're changing all those lives.
yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah.
And then we can get into how you went from inspiration to creating that.
Yeah. So my business is called Fearless Communicators, and we are a public speaking coaching business.
Mhm.
Really, we're in the transforming of truth tellers,
Yes.
right? I think people think they want public speaking training, but what they really want to do is be liberated from fear, shame, doubt, and have the courage to stand in I'm going to say the word authentic, and we'll unpack it later,
Hmm.
the authenticity of their body, their voice, their breath, their story, and a commitment to channel that in service of other people.
Mm.
So, and it's a fine line because there are people who fear, shame, and doubt when it's running the show. It is about them, right? And there may be like a little mass. It's like, I want this to be about other people, but really
Hmm.
it's about their ego or their validation or their approval. And I think that in the way we approach the act of speaking, uh, how is it that you can create the circumstance for everything that's irrelevant to melt and disappear, so you can channel what there is for you to communicate in service of an audience? And I'm going to say that because you're a fucking dancer. Can I drop the F-bomb, Lisa?
Sure.
Okay, amazing. Do you know the term duende?
Dream?
No,
No.
duende.
Duende.
This is about to be your new favorite word, Lisa.
Okay, okay, I'm into it.
Okay. So duende comes from the flamenco tradition,
Hmm.
and it's the moment the fairies take over. So it is the moment in dance or movement or song where everything disappears and you are one with
Hmm.
body, with rhythm, with audience, with voice, with spirit. And it's orgasmic. It is like literally everything disappears and you're in this state of absolute flow, and you can't control it.
Mm.
You can't force it to happen. You can't will it to happen. You can't make it happen. It surprises you. And when you find yourself in that space, you need to have the skill set and wherewithal of presence to know how to ride the wave.
Yes.
and then that's it, and then it's over. It's fleeting.
Whew.
In our speaking, how are we creating the environment for ourselves to be a receiver of the magic and the fairies? So when they fucking take over,
Yeah.
I can just channel.
Ooh. Yeah.
Right
And
now, that's
that,
not a mystery. Do you know what I mean? It takes practice, and then you got to let it go and allow the fairies to show up.
yeah. And that it really goes to it's so fun to watch people who are really good at what they do because
Mm,
they have the fairies, but they also have the skill set.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And then ego, fear, shame, doubt go away because I'm just here to give you this message.
I'm kidding. Literally, I'm just channeling. Take it or
Mm.
fucking leave it. Here it is.
Yeah.
Right? Here it is.
That's beautiful.
And I say, and it's not that you disappear, right? I mean, ego disappears. And I do think that it is important for us to lean in and share of our experience, our story, etc.
Sure.
And ultimately, all of it is parable.
Mm-hmm.
So I shared this, but let what I shared or the lessons that I'm imparting here, let them be of service to you. Good
Absolutely.
night and good luck. Exit stage left.
And bye.
See you at the cheese plate. I'll see you at the cheese plate.
Always the cheese plate. So when
Always. Oh,
you've created this place for people to get the skills to share this magic that they have. How did you have this magic within you? How did you go from inspiration to like owning this company that connects every room I'm in with you, connecting people?
so I say it is rooted in deep pain and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when one experiences it, I think there are people from whom deep shame and pain and hurt cause hurt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I want to move away from the binary, and I think there are people who also from deep shame, pain, and hurt have a greater capacity for love and empathy and steer that energy. And it's not like I don't want to be, what's the word, judgmental,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think that there are people who experience some circumstances you're like, I don't know how the hell you got out of that.
Mm-hmm.
I had immense, again, love, familial privilege. My parents had no idea what to do with a queer child. So
Right.
me growing up as a kid, I understood that the world was operating in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to perform something. I had to convince everyone else that I was a part of that, when in reality, I was an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
So the only place that I could really feel as though I was myself was alone in a room, because I was putting on a show from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I had words, I had language, I had things that I had to say, I had interests that I had to express, because kids were already getting some sensibility that there was something up with Eduardo. He was not like the other little boys,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I have an identical twin brother who's straight. So it's an interesting context, because, on the one hand, I feel like there was a part of me growing up where I failed the masculinity test as measured by my father, which is
Mm-hmm.
probably something that many men and women in relation to their mothers may have when they're in reflection or comparison or looking at the performance of a certain gender and your relationship to that. So I felt like I failed at my father's test. I think my father failed his father's test. I'm sure his father,
Sure.
my grandfather, failed his grandfather's test. So I think there's a generational failing that probably happens. And I had this twin brother who, I mean, the way I describe it is that when we were playing Little League soccer, there was a game, very clear game that I remember. My brother was playing forward, and then he moved to midfield, and then he was sweeper, and then he was goalie. And I was like stationary, like right fullback, collecting rocks that I named after the Von Trapp children. So I'm like literally like, this little rock is Liesel, and this little rock is Brigida, and this one's Friedrich. My brother's like, wah, and I literally
Right.
the rocks and I stuffed them in my socks, because I was like, now I have the Von Trapp children. I got to keep them. Who's like running on a soccer field with rocks in their socks? My father was like, what are you doing? Why do you have a rock collection in your socks during the soccer game?
Mm-hmm.
So, so I think that for me growing up, what that caused me to be was an observer,
Mm-hmm.
because I was always calibrating, is this space safe or no?
Sure.
Do I allow this out or do I not? Do I have to check? Do I have to change the quality of my voice? Do I have to edit? I oftentimes found myself more comfortable with adults than I did with kids, because kids didn't know what to do with me, and kids would pick on me. But the parents, were like, who's this child who wants to talk about, political policy? And like, I was like 8 or 9, it's like, what are you thinking about the election? You know what I mean? Like, they were like, who's this kid? But
Right.
I want to talk about opera, or I want to talk about theater, I want to talk about literature, I want to talk about whatever, that there was, I think, an aesthetic or a way of looking at the world that was also not Miami. It was not my ecosystem, and it was not also generational. Like, I had other interests.
Sure.
And I think that observation piece and the performance piece is why I desperately wanted to be an actor more than
Sure.
anything I liked, because that's what I was doing. I was acting, was putting on a show. And then, of course, being Cuban and of Cuban ancestry, my parents' worst nightmare was that I'd be gay and an actor. So, yay,
Here I am.
here I am, like, there I am in all of the glory. So I think that with that I think the root of my work around speaking and performing and all that other stuff originated in this tension point. I didn't have like practical spaces within which to perform, because I didn't do that growing up, but I was in an act of performing all the time. It wasn't until I got to college that I started singing in a singing group in a glee club. And then after I graduated from college, moved to New York and said, I played by everybody's rules, I's dotted, T's crossed. Now I'm ready to be an actor. And then
Yeah.
that was a 15-year career where I sang, I danced, I tumbled, but I was in this like living of this childhood dream. Actually, because I'm here, I'm going to show you this. This is me at my first Broadway show
Aw.
in New York City. And I have this, so interesting. The reason why I keep this picture is because I think that this little boy had a dream and I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I committed to it, and I found myself on stage for over 15 years in almost 30 some productions, almost 40 productions. And I think what happened is that was all a stepping ground
Mm-hmm.
for what I have the privilege of doing now.
Yes.
I thought the theater was a thing. The theater was not the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The theater was not the thing. It was a part of the thing, but it was not the thing. And so I trained at one of the top conservatories in the United States, which is in La Jolla. And a lot of team members actually went there. So it's UC San Diego, where all the actors also teach public speaking to undergrads.
Smart.
So I was like, so we teach acting, and then we also teach public speaking. And that's where I started teaching public speaking. And I did 3 quarters of public speaking teaching. And I absolutely loved it.
Mm.
I absolutely loved it. And I had clocked for myself that this would be a very useful side hustle to my acting career.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the course of 7 years after graduate school, I would kind of side hustle. Like, I befriended board members at theater companies. They would invite me to their companies to do public speaking workshops. I would take on a client. I would like leverage my network. And I think going back to what you said about the web, I have a huge family. So I know instinctively how to navigate the intricate webs of expansive, large family that lives all over the world, that speaks multiple languages, and how I can feel both connected and loving to them, even though we are not in each other's present
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. And I think I have always leveraged relationships in that way. I have a really amazing web of people. I think I also show up to give, so I think that's at the root of it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and uh, and I have the blessing of a huge web. And I think that as a business owner, when I started my business in 2015, I leaned on it. That was
Sure.
familial, that was undergraduate, that was professional, that was any space where I could, can someone get me in? Do I know someone? Does anybody have asking for help?
Yeah.
Was at the root of it. And now here we are. I mean, it's possible to look at a world where Fearless Communicators began in 2007, but I really say that it began in 2015. That's when I call it like legal Zoom official.
Right.
It was a long pregnancy before it was officially like an elephant pregnancy. It was like a 7-year kind of brewing. And then in 2015 is when I went all in and said, this is the thing. And I think at the root of it, Lisa, I think there's a part of me that has always felt committed to and inspired by so much. And I love that you said the word inspire, and I want to unpack that in a moment. But I knew that there was so much that I cared about. There was so much that moved me. There was so much that I was passionate about. And I also knew that I was not the best person suited to speak or tackle all of those things.
Yes.
And if I could work with the people who were poised to make the biggest difference in all of these different things that I was really passionate about, now we're talking about making a difference.
Mm. Mm.
I think that's where the speaking thing works. And I mean, building a business, and many of my trainers, all of them have backgrounds in the theater. There's
Right.
probably some way in which they have all experienced some of this outsider performative kind of tension point for an array of different reasons that they possess in their various intersectional identities. And I think that there are so many that because one, we are creative collaborative artists and storytellers, we're not just writers of stories, we're embodied storytellers. So I know what it's like to be in a story physically, not just intellectually. So
Right.
what it's like to be an agent in a story. I understand plot because I've been an agent of plot. I understand character because I've been a character. I've been a protagonist, an antagonist. I've been the chorus. I've been, whatever. Like all of that has me understand story and storytelling in a different way. So, so it is in this kind of recipe, like mixture, that you find these human beings who are also unbelievably gifted, unbelievably talented and smart,
Mm-hmm.
and can do so much more than serve, sushi at a dinner party as actors, or
Right.
at the local thing, right? Because I have found in my experience I mean, there are like 1% of actors who's just like, get the fuck away from me. You're like egomaniac, disaster,
Right.
thank you. And everyone's like, stay away from that person. From my experience, actors are unbelievably sensitive, verbal,
Sure.
brilliant minds and thinkers, because we are students of people and words and language. And that's who I have the privilege of having on my team. Like it
Yeah.
is a real gift. And it's all happened organically. Like it's all been intuitive. It's all been organic. There was no business plan. I didn't sit down, with a
Right.
business plan or anything. That it has literally been intuitive and trusting and listening and instinct and having champions and having people who know so much more than I do around to help support and uplift in the journey.
I love that. So what you said about pain and shame, like you transformed pain and shame into this amazing thing and helping people
Mm.
uh transform into the truth tellers they need to be.
Mm.
So I heard Brene Brown say that around midlife, which is interesting, we're both in our 40s, like the universe or God pulls you in and is like, if you're lucky, you're halfway done. And people do two things with that. They
Mm.
either get kind of angry and like buy a Lamborghini or something, or they
Their
get
wife, they divorced their wife, they divorced their
right,
family,
right.
their spouse, they
um,
get a lot of plastic surgery,
right.
buy a
And you're like,
Lamborghini, and
what's happening?
yeah.
Or they get curious And I heard from a lot of what you said is that because you talked a lot about, it's interesting, I used the word thread before, like you followed the thread. Life gave me this, then acting gave me this. So like, it sounds like you took what you felt as a child and like followed the thread to where you are now, which is helping others do the same thing.
Yeah.
Does that feel accurate?
And I think that the other thing that happens, and I think that we are in our prime,
Yeah. Oh, me too. I love it.
right? And I feel like there's one of my favorite plays and movies, and one of my favorite actresses is Maggie Smith, who did The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which is a great movie. It's a great book if you've never read it. It's about a woman in her prime. She's a bit of a disaster, but it's worthwhile. So anything I think about my prime, I think of Dame
Yeah.
Maggie. There is, I remember I was 38 when I started my business. And I'm going to go specific. I was 38. I had been laid off from this theater company. And that was like the death knell. I was just like, this is it. This is the universe telling me, because I would have stayed. And I was an amazing company member. The artistic director was apologetic when he was like, I don't have a job for you, and we're all going to work for you one day. He's just like, I just don't have a job for you.
Right.
In that moment, I practiced the 3 Gs: grace, gratitude, and generosity, which has been, we keep on going back to gratitude. So I think there's something in that thread. And I was living in a 4-bedroom apartment with Ben, one of my team members. I was the oldest person. I had the biggest room, which was not a big room because this is Brooklyn, New York City, but it just meant I had the bigger closet because I was the homosexual with the bigger wardrobe. And 3 others, all of us were queer, living in Brooklyn. I was paying like $825 a month for my apartment, or for my room in the apartment. And luckily, I've done a lot of transformational work on myself, and my failure narrative is like already always present.
Got it.
So there's and that's like an origin wound. Like, who I was a failure because I was gay, that I let people down, that there are various ways that I could very quickly go to the failure pity party. And I remember there was a moment early in the building of the business where I was staying in this apartment. I think the first year, I think I made $15,000. Like, I did not have, like, when I called for like Obamacare, they were like, oh no, you don't qualify. Like, you're on Medicare. Like, I could have food stamps if I wanted. Right. And I'd been, because there was like a bridge, there was unemployment. There's no trust fund. There's no family wealth. There's no, I mean, again, lots of privilege, and this was like a self-funded.
Oh, yes, I understand.
Experience. This was a self-funded experience. And in the midst of that, I was doing I was stepping into the highest accountability in the state of New York, in New York City, for this program called the Team Management Leadership Program through Landmark. And I had just come back from their conference in San Francisco, or in Los Angeles, and I had bed bugs and I had crabs. So I was just like, what is happening to me? Yeah. I was like, this is so low, And I think that where I'm at right now, I have my own 2-bedroom apartment in New York City. I have a team of 13 people. We're, a high 6-figure business, like creeping our way, manifesting and desiring and stepping into the million and beyond, right? That all of that was perfect.
Yeah.
There was absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think that sometimes what happens is we live in relationship to a figment and a fiction, which is a dream, or something that is 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years always ahead of us. And we lose the power and the beauty and the perfectness of right now.
Yeah.
And I was just in relationship, I was in a gratitude event. And I was in a room having a conversation with young women who were late 20s, early 30s, entrepreneurial and directional. Like, my life has to, why don't I? And again, I'm all for goals and all that other stuff, right? I'm not saying like shout it all out. And there is something, like, I had recently been in conversations with a girlfriend of mine. I was like, what if there's no getting anywhere?
Right.
What if this is just it? And I remember that there was so much suffering that I had, that 25 didn't look the way I thought 25 was going to look like, and 30 didn't look the way I thought 30 was going to look like, and 35 didn't look the way I thought 35 was going to look like. And then 38 definitely didn't look like it, because I was in a closet with crabs and bed bugs in Brooklyn in a shared apartment and not my extravagant brownstone, in the Village.
Right.
Or my mansion in Los Angeles, or, whatever that thing is, and like, if I can dance with whatever is happening to me in this moment as perfect.
Yes. And that goes back to, we were talking about gratitude and inspiration. Like, aren't those really tied to being present?
100%.
Yeah.
And the word inspiration comes from the same root word as the word expire, aspire, and it means with breath.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And the thing that brings us all back to the present
is the breath. Like, in this moment, I have this breath, and I have this breath, and I have this breath. And what do I do with this breath in this moment?
Yes.
And I think that's when I have the privilege and opportunity to speak. Do I speak from a space of creation, or do I speak from a space of destruction? Do I speak to inspire, or do I speak to terminate or punish? Like, what is the source of the breath? Like, what am I harnessing? What power am I harnessing? And how am I using that?
Sure. Which really also, when we go back to the very beginning, getting us out of like fear, shame, and doubt, like getting us out of ego is being present.
100%.
How can I just be the tool right now?
And how can I just be right here, right now?
Right.
With all of you. Hi, people who are listening.
Yeah. Like,
let's just take a breath together.
Or 76.
76. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a gift that we have this breath right now.
It also really allows you to embrace the imperfectness of it all, because it's like, first of all, I heard somebody say this, but like, if you're watching a movie and they were like, there was a girl and she never had any problems and she made enough money and she had this mansion in Los Angeles, you'd be like, this movie sucks.
Sucks. Don't care. Not interested. Yeah. Nothing happens. You're at Starbucks,
Right.
Starbucks.
Yeah. Like, to go back to Joseph Campbell, like, we need to overcome. And like, that's where the beauty is.
Well, and that is conflict. That is tension. And it's so interesting, because I feel like in some ways we want to shield people from conflict.
Always.
And that conflict is good.
Yeah. So good.
So good. Conflict is necessary. Without conflict, there's nothing. Yeah. Like, there has to be conflict. There has to be struggle. There has to be tension. Otherwise, it's always Starbucks at 2:00 when nothing's happening.
So boring. Like, not even Starbucks in a parking lot across from a TJ Maxx in the suburbs.
And a Michael's, and you're like, should I get the yarn or should I not get the yarn? Should I get the pasta fagioli at the Olive Garden or should I not? That's the big decision. Should I do? I'm going to get the unlimited soup, salad, and breadsticks. Do I want the pasta fagioli or the minestrone?
Oh boy, yeah. I
But
think one.
still, internal conflict. I got to make a choice. At least that's interesting. What do they choose?
Well, because then we start to create conflict
Yeah,
when there's no conflict. So no, let's just avoid the Starbucks in the suburbs.
totally.
One of the feelings that I think has been really important in my life and transformation is awe.
Hmm.
When was the last time you felt awe in your life?
Hmm. Try to. I wish I would surrender more into it when I witness it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like sometimes there's a way that it's just like we live in a world that's a little hashtag no big deal. Like I
Right.
just flew from Boston to New York. And that is awe-inspiring. The fact that we can get on this vehicle and in 30 minutes and go
I
from
know.
Boston to New York, and you're flying and you see the clouds and the expanse and you see the people and not the people, but you see the houses and the trees and the rivers and you see the patterns.
Mm. The
And
plane window.
the
I've
plane
flown
window.
so much, but the plane window makes me feel awe.
Yeah, you look outside and the cloud configurations and the sun and all that other stuff. But I want to go back to this idea of the when they and the disappearing. Actually, I'll tell you, I, when I stopped acting, uh, it took me maybe 3 or 4 years to heal that dream shift, to complete any judgment or feelings that I had about that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really fully embrace the new expression of that same desire to create and to be creative and generative through the lens of my business, Fearless Communicators. So I have now gone back to the theater.
Mm-hmm.
So as a patron, which is amazing because I can just go and sit and enjoy, and then I can leave. I can leave it. I can leave it at the theater. I'm not like, why wasn't I called in for that show, or why didn't I audition, or why did my agent or my manager, like I'm like not in that realm at all. I can literally just go, embrace it, and then leave. And I have recently, not because I get cheap tickets, I get orchestra seats to the Met, the opera. So maybe Lisa will have to go in a little
Please, please, please. I know. I
bit,
was like, I
a
don't know
little
how to
bit.
weave that in.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. I'm actually going tonight. And part of my reason why I'm now into opera is two things. One is that it takes work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
Right.
So maybe you need to do a little bit of homework before you go. Maybe you need to read the plot synopsis or understand the opera or understand the artist or the music. And there's some that you know and then some that you don't. And I've been a little brave in some of these because I had some understanding and some scope, and I attended before, but not like a homosexual in their 40s who's ready to be a patron. That's
Right.
different energy.
Yeah.
And part of my connection to it is also my grandmother and my great grandmother, who, when they fled Spain and Cuba, were huge opera lovers. So they would play opera music to me as a child, and they would tell me their stories about in the late 1930s, early 40s, going to opening night at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City in their fur. And I'm just like all about that visual of my grandmother, my great grandmother, and that story. Anyway, I saw for the first time ever a Wagnerian opera called Rome. And it was 4.5, almost 5 hours. Now, I'd taken my disco nap before, so I was like primed.
You knew. Yeah.
I knew. And I had done my research. I had read up to the script. I knew the story, was ready for it. And I was in awe of the production value and the voice of the Polish tenor. And And there is something going back, and I'm going to go back to this idea of duende, and it's something that I've also experienced before, but to me, the closest expression that I have and experience to God is in the participation of and or in the witnessing of harmony. Now that can include, it doesn't have to sound pretty, like there could be tension and dissonance, that is also stunning and spectacular,
Yes.
right? But I remember I was in a glee club in college, and there was a song that we sang called Shenandoah, which is an old American folk tune.
Yeah.
And when the song ends, I'm a tenor two. There's a tenor two split. And I could either go tenor two one or tenor two two. Didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But that split, either note that I chose, created heaven. It was like this glimpse into perfection and then oblivion. And so I have been an agent in the creation of that. That's also when the spirit takes over and it just disappears, and you disappear, and you have now contributed to something bigger than yourself, a sound, an experience that is out there, not in here, out there, that brings us all, unifies, connects. And there was singing in this opera that had me in awe. There was a human being who sat down and wrote that. And then that thing that he wrote hundreds of years ago is continued to be greeted by musicians and conductors and singers and choruses and actors and whatever. And they gather in a room and they learn that.
Yeah.
And then they stand on a stage and they give it. And I can just bask in the glory of it.
Yeah, they share it.
They share it. And it's like, it's a wash. It's like I mean, and it doesn't always happen, but you're awashed in the sound. And that to me is awe.
The same thing in Middle Eastern dance and music is called tarab. And like, I have had experiences when dancing to live music where my whole feeling is like, there it is. There's, God, the universe, but it's just like, that's where you become the channel.
Yeah. But it's like in mysticism, and you're Egyptian, right? So there's also like the Sufi,
rolling,
church, right? Like that, it is in movement. It is in that we can awaken and the divine.
Yeah. What a gift. And to do that, you have to be present. Eduardo, I would hope next time we could do a 7-hour podcast, because I'm like, keep talking about it. Let's do it. And then the people who listen to it will be me and you.
Yes, I love it. It'll be all about us talking for 7 hours.
A podcast by us and for us. Where can people find more out about you and Fearless? And do you all have anything coming up you want to share?
So we do. So we have an amazing showcase coming up May 4th. May the 4th be with you, which you, Lisa Zahiya, will be a part of. #no big deal.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Where we work with a cohort of thought leaders on crafting a TED-length signature talk in 6 days. It's like getting shot out of a cannon. So if you are interested in witnessing truth tellers beaming their fucking light on May 4th, we'll include that however it is that people are downloading this
I got it.
podcast. And then I think the other thing that would be great is to find me on LinkedIn. So if anything inspired you and moved you in anything that I shared and said, please feel free to drop me a note on LinkedIn and just say, I was somewhere and you said something and I felt it in that moment. And I'm grateful. Thank you.
Well, I am grateful. Thank you. I got a lot to think about now. Yeah. So
I feel like every time I have a conversation with you, Lisa. So I feel the jive and the jam.
Yeah. Well, thank you, friend. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
That's it, folks. Another amazing episode of Limitless with Lisa Z. I am inspired and want to give you the homework. Take some notes, take action, do one thing today that can move you towards your dreams. Got feedback? Let us know. You can write to us at lisa@lisazahiya.com or visit us online at lisazahiya.com.